All right, and we're live. So, welcome everyone to this remote interview. My name is Lisette, and I'm interviewing people and companies doing great things remotely. And today, on the line, all the way from Germany, Stefan Roloff. Stefan, you are an Agile coach, amongst other things, and you're here today because I heard about your PI planning sessions and how you do them in a hybrid way, and it was awesome. And I thought this is the perfect thing to introduce to my audience. So thank you so much for being here today, Stefan.
Thank you, Lizette, for having me on your podcast.
So let's dive in with the first question, which is, what does your virtual office look like? What do you need to get your work done?
Well, the minimum set for my virtual office would just be a stable internet connection, laptop, and a headset because I'm talking to a lot of people, and also the webcam, which mostly I use, and I think it's very valuable if you are working together remotely. So that would be the bare minimum. I like more screen real estate, as a colleague of mine put it, because I'm using a lot of big, giant digital whiteboards, and then having separate 2 to 3 screens is a good thing to have. I also learned that standing up sometimes is better for your posture, so I do have a height adjustable desk right now in my home office. But this is all yeah, luxury things. If I would really go for the bare minimum, it's the three things that I mentioned in the beginning.
So I'm interested in both the minimum and the ideal. So standing desk, multiple monitors, anything else you'd add to that if in the ideal workspace?
I added some lighting as well. So when I come across camera, I'm a little bit better lit. Most people in my company don't really care that much about their digital appearance, but I do, and I think it's important, and it does make a difference, and it's just a small change for me. So that's one more thing.
One more thing. Right. So we've all sort of leveled up our appearance online. Those of us that like to do that indeed. And so let's just dive right in. I want to talk about your PI planning sessions. And then, so in order to do that, though, we've got to sort of step back and understand what it is exactly and where it comes from. And when we were talking, I wrote down scaled agile and PI planning. So for our audience, can you first describe what is scaled agile and how does PI planning fit into that?
Yes. So peer planning is the key term and the key event in the Scaled Agile framework. The Scaled Agile framework is a framework that is applied by companies all around the world who want to work in an agile way, but not with one team, but with multiple teams. And this is what the most known frameworks as Scrum or Kanban don't cover. So a couple of years ago, more than 10 years ago already, um, some people had the idea, okay, what to do if I not have one team that is working iteratively, making 2 week sprints and with short planning sessions and review sessions and retrospectives and all this. But what do I, if I do have 5, 10 teams, if I have 100 people, 200 people, 500 people that are working together in one product? Um, and this is hard to organize sometimes, especially if you want to keep it agile and not top down waterfally. So this is where the scaled agile framework comes in. It helps companies to organize multiple teams that are collaborating to create a product.
And is this just for IT teams, or does scaled agile also mean they're scaling it out to other departments in the organization, like HR or marketing? How far does it go?
Yes. So the origins of the scaled agile framework root into the IT departments, that's for sure. And this is also where I do apply it. But it is not limited to just IT. It is very agnostic. It doesn't use any IT terms. So basically, it can be applied even company wide. And there's also a part of the Scaled Agile framework that goes way beyond the teams. There's also portfolio management in there. There's budget management topics in there. It's also strategy parts in there. So it's a giant toolbox. This is also, by the way, the most criticized thing, that it is so giant, so huge, offers so many things that a lot of people are overwhelmed by the whole framework, compared to much lighter frameworks like Scrum. But it's a toolbox, and you can choose and pick what you want to do and take from this toolbox.
Right, indeed. I've also heard that same criticism. So pros and cons to every system, right? There's no perfect system, otherwise we'd all be using that perfect system. So
That's true.
how does PI planning fit into all of this? Describe what that is.
Yes. So one of the key elements of SAFe is PI planning. There's even one cite from the inventor, Dean Leffingwell, and says there's no magic in SAFe besides PI planning, maybe. And PI planning is the scaled version, basically, of a sprint planning in Scrum. So in a sprint planning in Scrum, you sit together with your whole team and think about, okay, what from the list of things that we can do to enhance the product in the next 2 weeks, what do we want to do? And choose the elements that you want to do next 2 weeks with your team. The PI planning is the scale version of this. So instead of looking just for the next 2 weeks and the next iteration, it looks out to the next 5 to 6 iterations, so 10 to 12 weeks. And it also not covers one team, but all of the teams that are working on the same product. So this can be up to 125 people and up to 10, 15 teams.
That
For the
sounds
smallest version of SAFe, by the way.
so that sounds indeed very complex as you're organizing it. Now, I guess ideally these sessions are run in person, right? And probably before the pandemic, everybody and give us a little bit of framework about yourself. Before the pandemic, were you also working in person? What was your hybrid work trajectory? What did it look like for you?
Yes, it is indeed mentioned or thought of as being an in-person event. It's even called big room planning in other contexts. So that means normally the idea was to get everybody together in the same room and to do this planning, to have the shortest way possible for communication. Just walk over to another person, to another team, and ask a question. Everybody's there. That is necessary. Now, when I started at my company here, it was just pre-pandemic, and the first 3 months, I went to the office like 4 to 5 days a week and met people live. But even then, we were working together with people from Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. So that means a part of my team that I was working for as a Scrum Master was remote all the time. And when they asked me, okay, can you please set up Scrum for us? I made it hybrid. I made it remote first, basically, because I said I don't want to go into a room with part of the people being here and part of the people being remote, because the level, the playing field is not even. Then it's like the Champions League of hybrid collaboration if some people are co-located and other people are remote. So I set it up and said to my team back then, let's do it all remote friendly. If you're here, fine. We can be in the same room, but everybody has their own camera, their own microphone, their own screen, and you can just be in your office. And if you want to talk about things afterwards, do it. No problem. Let's have a coffee after some meetings. But I set up remote first, and then came the pandemic, and then we're like, okay, there's no change at all
Uh,
because we were set up already.
but let me dive into that a little bit because it probably wasn't all roses going remote first, right? It doesn't feel ideal, I'm sure, for the people who are in the room to have their own laptops and heads. I mean, if you're sitting in the same room with people, you don't want your headset on. However, what was challenging for your team in that setup?
Um, at first, it was challenging to really, um, yeah, be aware to include everybody in the meeting because, yeah, well, we're working together with people from Southeast Asia. It's a lot warmer in Southeast Asia than in Germany. People, if they are working from home at least, tended to not want to put on the camera. Yeah, so
Right.
sometimes this information was missing about face expressions, body reactions, stuff like that. And therefore, also when it comes to the flow of a talk, it's different if you do it online, especially if you don't see each other. And you have to build in pauses. And while we're Germans, like to talk and talk and talk, and maybe somebody stops talking, the other person right away starts. in Southeast Asian cultures, you need to leave more of a gap to let the other person really step into the talk and the discussion. And if you're doing that remotely, you really have to learn that and incorporate that in your talking.
Oh, I love that. So you really, that's one of the etiquettes that you established was just leave more space in between talking with each other so that the remote participants had a chance to step in if they wanted to. I mean, not a yeah, love it. And I can imagine with the weather and you're working from home and you don't have air conditioning. Also, some people don't want to have their homes seen. You know, that's a valid concern. Were there any other etiquettes that came up for you guys in those hybrid meetings?
Um, Not much. It was mostly me as a Scrum Master. I was the moderator there. So if you do it all in one group, in one room, you'd probably, for really easy things, you don't need a moderator. Just do the things. But if you do it online, in my opinion, it oftentimes helps to have a moderator that keeps an eye on the time, keeps an eye to include everybody as well, and yeah, do the facilitation of the meetings.
Right? Just to bring the awareness into the group. It's usually not with malicious intent that people leave each other out. It's almost just, especially if the videos aren't on, right? You just sort of naturally forget. In fact, whenever I do an icebreaker with a group, we use the popcorn technique, which is I choose the first person, then they choose the next person, then they choose the next person, and so on. And if the cameras are off, those people inevitably get chosen last, like 95% of the time, because everybody else is so much more present. It's just natural. Like, no, so it's yeah, it's just part of the thing. All right. So back to PI planning. Ideally, we do this in person. If you've got hundreds of people there in person. So first describe to us, how is it done in person? Do you just have like thousands of sticky notes everywhere?
Indeed, you do have. So if you do it in person, you basically have to provide lots of brown paper or lots of flip charts and lots and lots and lots of sticky notes. Um, well, it's mostly done really haptic, and people, yeah, write down things on post-its. They shift post-its around. So this is what is happening there, and yeah.
I just have a question because, as companies are working and strategizing, they've got stuff in tools, right? I'm sure that these rooms full of stickies, they don't stay up like that. It's got to be transferred into some sort of a tool eventually, right? So do you just take everything out of the tool and onto stickies and then back into the tool afterwards?
That's indeed what a lot of companies did. In fact, they they photographed things, photographed the results, and then brought it back into the digital tools potentially if they have used it by then. But also, there's a merit if you have co-located teams, but have teams from different locations. They can have a non-digital way of working and collaborating and organizing their everyday life. So this is also possible. For a lot of people, this is much more visible because a sticky note is always on. You don't have to go to a website, to a tool, and look for the information. It's always there, so it's not on a screen. So this is also something that some people favored. But I'm you're fully right. Most of the time, people transfer these information that they collected there back into the systems.
Okay, okay. Well, that makes sense, right? And so you have to find a way to track it somehow. Okay, so we've got PI planning. So in the past, we had everybody together in the same room, thousands of stickies, people talking. How long does one of these sessions usually last?
The PR plannings, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
That depends. If you do it live, the recommendation by the SAFe framework is 2 days.
Wow.
If we do it remotely, we take longer time. And if you have the challenge that I have to incorporate multiple time zones, then you really extend it much further and spread it out. So in my current case, I do have 9 teams from 3 different time zones, which includes Canada, Germany, and Kuala Lumpur, where Canada and Malaysia are 12 hours apart. So basically,
Ooh.
there is hardly or no overlap at sustainable hours, let's put it this way. So we have to split it out, and we do it in 4 days actually. So to have the German Malaysian mixed teams collaborate, we have 4 half days, and then to have the Canadian German mixed teams to do it also in 4 half days, but that will be German afternoons and German mornings for the German Malaysian mixed teams.
Okay, so already it's complicated. How do you set this up? What does the technology, the tooling look like in your PI planning session?
Well, the basic foundation for this is a calendar. So you need to have a calendar, especially being aware of time zones. And then you need to set up all these sessions in the calendar, but and also invite the correct people. So I'm inviting roughly across the event, roughly 90 people, but in different parts of the event. So you have to be really aware of inviting the right people to the right slot. Then if I created all these slots for the event in my calendar, I also create some breakout calls scheduled somewhere in my calendar. And all these calls that are then in my calendar, all the links to these ones, I bring on a digital whiteboard. So I basically visualize the big room that you had in the past where everybody meets. I visualize that on a digital whiteboard and create rooms, separate breakout rooms for the teams. Visualize them also as teams, as like a top-down view if you would look at a map of a building. And yeah, every team then knows, okay, this is my room, and in this room there's a icon that is MS Teams icon, and then they click on that icon, and then they join the call, and the call that was initially scheduled in my calendar.
Okay, so there basically you visualized it on a whiteboard. Is it, I'm assuming it's a Microsoft whiteboard within Teams, or do you use a
We use the tool of concept board. I mean,
Hmm.
Miro or any other tool would work as well. Concept board is a tool of our choice. Yes,
Right. There's a million virtual whiteboards out there that everybody has their favorite. Okay,
that's
so
true.
you've got a virtual whiteboard and you've then visualized different rooms on this whiteboard with links to the actual meeting links. So what happens in each one of these individual rooms?
So we do have we have one big room, and this is also the starting. Everybody meets in the same big room, and in this big room at the beginning of PI planning, the business owners, that's a role in the Scrum framework, Safe framework. Sorry, the business owners explain, okay, what is going on in the next 3 months? What is the larger, bigger picture? What is the context that we're operating in? What is the goals that we try to achieve within this PI planning or within the next PI? And then also it goes on to the product management. Product management then shows a little bit more detail. Okay, these goals, we want to reach them with these features that we want to add to the product. And this is potentially the teams that can cover these features. And it also goes on to an architecture vision. And me, as the main facilitator, also explains a little bit more the process and the context of the planning. So, what is to be done by when? Now, all the teams also do have their own Scrum Masters, and these are my co-facilitators, you could say.
Hmm.
And this is very, very helpful to have because then if a team is a little bit lost sometimes, okay, what should we do now? What is the next step? These co-facilitators, they're coached by me prior to the PI planning. What is going on? What is the whole process of this PI planning? And they know at any point in time what needs to be done. And also how to use the concept board, how to use the tools, and they can really guide all the teams.
Right. For the technical challenges or just the I didn't hear it correctly or my internet went out
Yes.
or something like that.
Yes.
So does everybody meet in the large room at the same time? Is that a synchronous meeting? So like one inconvenient meeting for everybody just to start it all out?
Unfortunately, you said inconvenient, but yes, this is one very large meeting. I will try to keep the time in this large meetings, in this large rooms for everybody with large groups as small as possible. But there's some information that is relevant for everybody.
Yeah.
So basically the first 2 hours, 1.5 to 2 hours, this is more the introductory opening part of this. And most of the rest of the PR planning is then spent at the breakout rooms. And in the breakout rooms, it's one breakout room per team. Sorry, one breakout room per team. And if a team wants to break down even further, say if you want to split up in two groups, I even have compartments in there, and they can choose to go into another breakout room, which is pre-scheduled, pre-arranged for them. Yeah, so this is what is going on. If the features that should be done by all teams in the next 10 to 12 weeks are presented to all teams, then the teams pull from this feature list the features that they think are best suitable for them. Sometimes they are prepared and pre-assigned to your team as well. If it's very complex topics, sometimes for more easy topics, they can just be pulled by any team. And if the teams then said, yep, okay, we have a set amount which we think is sufficient for the next 10 to 12 weeks, they go off to the breakout rooms and do their PF planning part. They break down these features into smaller pieces. A feature should be doable within this PI, within the 10 to 12 weeks with the whole team. They break it down into elements smaller than that, that can be done in the iterations, in the 2-week iterations by one team, and then sometimes even further. And this is the major big part. This takes not only one breakout session, but we have another 3-4 breakout sessions during the PI planning until almost the end, the closing.
And is everybody remote, or do you have some people working together in the office, or is it just one big mix?
It's actually a giant mix. So I personally, although I set it up remote first, I personally go to visit the office in Cologne to see my colleagues there, because I think it's sometimes valuable to speak with these colleagues in between the meetings. And yeah, it's just easier to get into connection during lunch and during other short breaks. Also, our colleagues in Malaysia chose to all come to the office and sit together in two large rooms as two teams. They thought it's beneficial for them to do it, and it works for them perfectly fine as well. For the teams that are more, let's say, hybrid, because they have people mostly in Germany and Malaysia, or Germany and Canada, most of these teams tend to go all full remote, and not go to any office and meet anybody else. It's fine. I'm not prescribing where people sit. I make it remote first, so to say. If people choose to not do it remotely but more flock together, this is also fine. Only requirement then would be, please monitor also your chat. If another team wants to contact you and you're all sitting together in one room, keep an eye or an ear on your telephone line there, because if the teams want to join, that's also the big bonus of a digital whiteboard. Everybody can join every room, so it's not restricted. If I need an information from another team, I can just simply click on their icon, join their call, and then I'm in the room, virtual room, with that team.
And so how are you visualizing all of the tasks and the breakdowns? How does that work?
So all the work that should be getting done, all the work items, so to say, we do have a different tool for that. We do have use Azure DevOps. In another context, I use Jira software, works perfectly fine as well. Whatever you pick there. So this is where the product management basically, together with the product owners, have the giant, what they call ART backlog. ART stands for ART, Agile Release Train. So all the teams together, they form this Agile Release Train. And this large ART is then prepared within the tool, Azure DevOps, and the people then have a look at, on one screen, maybe on the Azure DevOps elements, and then on the other screen see the digital whiteboard. I also screenshot parts of the tool to the digital whiteboard, so they basically do not have to go to the other tool, and they can just stay on one screen, just stay on the whiteboard, and just look there. Everything that is done in this digital whiteboard within the PF planning.
So many people say that this can't be done, but but I mean, you make it sound so easy. I'm like, oh, this can't be hard at all. But like, what's gone wrong? What goes wrong in these setups for you guys, or what's challenging for the teams? It can't be all roses.
No, it's definitely a challenge, and if you have done it quite a few times, I feel pretty comfortable to do it right now. but for a lot of people, it sounds like I'm doing some magic here. So I think the most important part is that you prepare the people before PL planning and walk them through the process of what is going on. So what will be the agenda? What will be the times? Which tools will we use? And
How do
yeah,
you do this? How do you do the pre-planning?
so for the very first PI planning, we even simulated this. So we made a fake PI planning that was much shorter, was just 2.5 days, and also had a fake business case. Scaled Agile Framework even provides this business cases that you can use for training. And I basically made a dry run with everybody, uh, and using the same tools and using also the same board with the same board design than I was using in the real PI later on. So people, when they joined the real PI planning, they were kind of comfortable because they knew their virtual room, they knew how to handle it, they have done it once already. Now just it wasn't the fake business case, but their own business case. Nowadays, I before every PI planning, I do a virtual room tour basically across the board. So the board enhances from here and there. Like I get feedback. Can you do this or that differently? Works for me in this way better. So I enhance the board every time. And also, you can imagine with 90 people on board, there's people leaving the train and joining the train. So there's always new people that have never ever been in a virtual PA planning, and especially for them, I do a virtual room tour and explain them and show them around on the board so they are comfortable with this digital room represented on the digital whiteboard.
Would you ever go back to everybody in the same room? Would you want to?
Good question. Good question. I mean, I'm a very social person and I really enjoy making connections with people. And therefore, I could imagine this being a great event if you do it live. And I think it would be a very different event as well, because it would be much more about connecting with each other.
Right.
I'm in the lucky position that the company sent me before the first PF planning. I've also done trainings with everybody that is on these trained, 2 full day trainings to get them trained and safe in the scaled agile framework. So they sent me to Kuala Lumpur. They also sent me to Canada and also here in Germany. So I've met everybody live at least once, and I think that's cool and valuable. But
Totally.
some other people, they have never met some other people that they're working together on a daily basis. So from that perspective of deepening the connection between people, I would really enjoy to do a live PI planning. When it comes to a business perspective, I think the cost of that would be very high with all the flight costs, all the hotel costs, all the beverage costs. So I'm not 100% convinced that the added benefit of doing it live would outweigh the added cost that it would do.
Ah, interesting. I'm a real believer that that it's nice to connect with each other in person occasionally. But I think that there's some really creative ways that we could start doing that instead of just bringing everybody together for one big thing. I mean, you could have mini retreats, you could have office swaps, you could do virtual co-working or real co-work. I mean, there's so many great things that we can do to connect with each other in person. I just feel like we could get a lot more creative in that area now. All right, we're reaching the end of our time, but I still have a couple of questions that I want to ask you. One is for people who are just starting out or just starting to try to organize this, what advice do you have? It sounds overwhelming in the beginning. Where might you start, or what advice would you give to somebody?
So if your company wants you to facilitate the collaboration of a lot of teams, you need to have the buy-in of two parties. Number one, you need to have the buy-in of the management or the people that are steering this whole thing. In our case, we call them business owners, and they are also department leads. They also have a manager position in our company. So they gave me a lot of freedom and said, okay, you're the expert. Tell us what we need to do to make this happen. And that was a great environment for me to be in, and I really enjoyed that. And the second one is you need everybody that should board the train to want to board the train. So they need to want to do this. You need to explain why are we doing this? Because you can imagine if you're just by yourself, you can do everything like you like. If you're in a relationship or in a group, you always have to kind of find a compromise. But over time, you probably form a really homogeneous group and it feels very natural. And you do not feel that your freedom of how to do things are anyway limited. Now, again, these teams, they have been working together for a long time. They are really connected with each other and have a homogeneous group. Now they are thrown in together with a lot of other teams, and certain things have to be harmonized so it works. So, and that means initially this is a loss of freedom of how can we do things. And you have to be really aware of that and have to really be there and listen to the people and like, hey, is there any issues? And provide lots of feedback loops, lots of open channels where people can contact the person and listen to the people and listen to their concerns. And also, what I would recommend to everybody who is doing a PR planning for the very first time, no matter if it's remote or if it's live, make everybody aware that at the beginning it will feel chaotic, but after you've done it 1 or 2 times, it will feel much better. And this was exactly what I've seen with my teams. I even prepared the third PI planning less than the first one, but people say, "Oh, this was so much better. It was so much easier now." And I was just smiling because I thought you guys made progress. I just did the same.
It's awesome. It's awesome. It's awesome to be able to see that, right? To
Yes.
see the progress also coming. Oh, that is really good advice. That is really good advice. Now, there's one last thing that I wanted to ask about, which is I saw on your LinkedIn profile that you call yourself a traveler or that you really enjoy traveling. And I wanted to ask you, what does that mean? What is traveler to you?
Well, a traveler is somebody that is not only going to another place to do some vacation time, but actually to explore the country, get to know the people, get to know the language, the culture. And I had the opportunity shortly after my university to do a trip around the world for 10 and a half months and seen quite a few places, Southeast Asia and Central America mainly. So following the sun, and I still love to travel. And if I haven't been on at the seaside for 3 months, I really get not homesick, but the opportunity, the opposite side
Vacation
thing.
sick.
Your vacation sick, exactly. I need to see the sea and be by the sea like every 3 months. And I'm in a position where I'm landlocked here. Yeah, so I'm in the middle of Germany. There is no sea close by, but I need to go. And this is something that I really need and what I really enjoy.
I love it. So being in new places and exploring, and what a great opportunity to take almost a year and go explore the world. Seems like it should be part of everybody's life. So lovely, absolutely lovely. All right, and for our last question of the day, if people want to learn more about you and PI planning, where's the best place to reach out to you? Where are you online?
Well, that probably would be on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, you can find me under my real name, Stefan Roloff, with double F at the end. And yeah, you can just look me up there, send me a message there if you have any questions. Uh, that will probably be the best way to contact.
All right, I'll put that in the show notes too, that everybody knows how to contact you. And hopefully you're not just bombarded with questions from people asking about PI planning, or maybe it's a new career, right? You can set this up for other people. But Stefan,
Yes.
thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your wisdom. I took copious notes. I think that people that are doing this kind of work will be, it's been really useful to have you. Thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Coming again.
All right, everybody, until next time, be powerful.